Hey everybody, happy Sunday. Welcome back. I am Gina from Advantage College Planning, and tonight we're going to be talking about the key things that juniors need to be focused on as they are getting ready to start this whole college search process, which is so exciting. So this is a really busy time for seniors. So I wanted to hop on and give a little love to the juniors out there so that you can learn a little bit about what you need to be focusing on this year, junior year. I know right now the seniors are getting a lot of focus from me, from our office, school counselors. Everybody's focused on the seniors because that November 1st deadline is like what, 10 days? I just looked at the calendar. Not that I'm sweating. It's going to be totally fine. Totally fine. We're going to make it. It's going to be great. We're going to make it to November 1st. All the applications are going to be submitted. It's going to be wonderful. I have a sign in my office that says, as a quote that says, "It always seems impossible until it's done." And so I have that up this time of year as a reminder for myself and for the students as they're working on getting these applications finalized. It's an exciting time. It's a busy time. But I wanted to give a little love to the juniors right now because juniors, this is a really important time of year for juniors as well. Obviously, it's not important in the same way it is for seniors with a deadline, but it's important to be thinking about what's to come with this college process. So now is a really good time for juniors to start planning ahead. So if you are new, welcome. I'm so glad that you were able to join me tonight. My name is Gina, and I'm with Advantage College Planning. I like to hop on Facebook Live a couple times a month, usually with different tips and advice and information about the college application process, just to try to help demystify some things and make it as smooth as possible. If you've been here before, you know kind of a little bit about what to expect, but I would love to know where you're tuning in from. I would love to know what year your students are. Tonight, the information really will be focused on what juniors need to know to make the most of their junior year. But if you have younger students, it's always helpful to know what's coming, right? If the sound is coming through, if the video is coming through, go ahead and give me a heart and a thumbs up or some kind of smiley face, one of those little emojis. Let me know everything's coming through. Awesome. All right, Autumn, you've got a junior. You are in the right place. Fabulous. That's really good. So as I go through and talk about the content tonight, I'll be keeping an eye on the chat. You can definitely put questions in there. I will have a chance for questions at the end, but if anything comes up as we go through, feel free to go ahead and pop them in the chat. Awesome. All right. So again, tonight we are going to be talking about the big three. So I call them the big three. So junior year, those are your grades, your teacher recommendations, and your extracurricular activities. Those are the big three areas that my juniors need to be focusing on. So let's jump into it and let's talk about why. Why are we focusing on these three key areas? So again, we are 10 days away from the November 1st deadline. And so for those of you who are not super familiar with the college application process, November 1st is the most common early action deadline for schools all across the country. So for students who are applying to college this year, if they're planning to submit applications in those earlier rounds, that date is pretty important. All of their materials, their applications, everything has to be in by that date if they want to be reviewed. So as we are feeling it right now with our seniors, we always have kind of a moment where some of the seniors have been planning for this. They've been planning ahead. Everything's really smooth. Everything's great. They're putting their final touches on. But year after year, these are the three key sticking points that come up for seniors again and again and again: grades, extracurriculars, and letters of recommendation. And for the students who we've been working with, since they were younger, so freshman, sophomore, 8th grade, freshman, sophomore, junior, we've had a chance to really build and make sure that our students are focusing on these things. But I know that a lot of students who don't have the opportunity to work with a college consultant don't know to focus on these areas. And really, the more that juniors can focus on these big three this year, the more you have a chance to have some nice, smooth sailing when you get into the application process rather than some stormy seas. So the big advice is to really learn from the students that have gone before you and do future you a favor, juniors, and by focusing on these key three areas. So let's talk about academics. Academics is always where we're going to start with the college process because above all else, application review is going to focus on your grades and the level of rigor of the coursework that you took based on what was available at your high school. That's going to be true for every school. No matter the selectivity, the colleges are going to be looking at your grades and the level of rigor of your classes. The key thing that we're looking for is always a strong, steady trend. Maybe you came into ninth grade hot and you kind of stayed there the whole way. That's awesome. Or we're looking for what I call an upward trend. And so maybe we had a little bit of a bumpy start down here in ninth grade, or maybe there was a little bit of a blip on the radar with a tough class sophomore year, but we're on an upward trend. We're moving up. The grades are going up as the rigor is going up. When you get to the college application process, it is not uncommon for students to have a little bit of a bump, right? At some point in ninth or 10th grade. Maybe you took your very first AP class in 10th grade and it was a little bit more than you'd bargained for, and your grade was a little bit lower in that class than you normally would have gotten. Maybe you got sick during final exams and that really impacted your grade in a class. These types of things happen. We're humans, so this is okay. When we get to the application process, there are different parts of your application, different opportunities where you can give a little bit of context and explain a little bit about what's going on with this grade, right? Why do I have a lower grade in this one class than what you're normally seeing on my transcript? And so in those situations, I work with students and we give an explanation, brief, to the point, straightforward, but essentially saying, here's what the circumstances were around this situation. Here's what I've done to rectify this so that this does not happen again. And now I'm doing well. Great. Junior year is then the year that you need to prove it. So if your plan is, let's say you had a bumpy something happen sophomore year, if your plan is to be able to write one of these narratives saying, here's what happens and I'm on the up and up and everything's better. If your grades junior year aren't reflecting that growth, then you can't give that explanation, right? So junior year grades are really important. It's also important to think about, again, that upward trend. It's one thing to overcome a lower grade freshman year or sophomore year. It's a little bit harder to overcome in the application review process. It's a little bit harder to overcome lower grades junior year because that's really the year that colleges are seeing your level of rigor go up. And so this is a little bit of a sign, right? How you're feeling as a student academically, as your level of rigor of your coursework goes up. Maybe you're taking more honors or more AP or more dual enrollment courses junior year than you've taken previously, right? If you're really struggling to keep up and this is really kind of pushing your limits, then that's a really good indicator for you of what type of academic environment you need to be thinking about is going to be a good fit for you in your college experience, right? And on the other side of the desk, that's what the colleges are looking at, right? The colleges and their admissions offices know the level of rigor that students are going to hit coming in. And so they're looking to see, okay, how is he or she doing once that rigor bar starts getting turned up a little bit, once that heat starts getting turned up junior year, how are we doing? Okay. So Kenneth asks, what do I consider a lower grade? Great question. That's going to be relative to the student. So if I'm looking at a transcript for a student who has all A's, right? And then all of a sudden that student gets a C, that's a pretty big dip. So like a 2-letter grade dip would be a lower grade. I guess so in general, a 2-letter grade dip from what your norm is going to be considered lower. If you're mostly an A student, a C is going to stand out. Okay. If you are mostly a B student, a C isn't great, but a D is really going to stand out. Right. So we want to try to stay within 1-letter grade. If you're mostly an A student, try to stay in that A, maybe some B's. But once you get a C, it looks a little, it's just sort of like, hey, what happened there? It raises a question. Yeah. So we really want to think about that academic experience. How are things going for you? How are you feeling in these classes? How are you being pushed? Are you being pushed too much? Do you feel like you need to maybe step it up next year? Kind of how is that process going? So academic rigor. The second part that students really need to be focusing on are the relationships that they're building with their teachers. So once colleges finish the academic review and they finish looking at the grades and the rigor, now they're going to start figuring out who is this student, right? So the first step is making sure that students have the academic strength to be successful and graduate on time and persist and graduate on time from the university. That's step one. But now we need to see now, who are we building in our community? Colleges are building a community. Think about it. There's between, 1,500 to 50,000 students on this campus. Colleges are building little cities. So they're trying to think about, who are we admitting? What are the different dynamics? What are the different personalities, the different strengths, the different experiences? So a student's character and who they are and how they contribute to a classroom community, that's really important. Colleges want students who are going to be a bit more dynamic. It's not just about coming into the academic setting and being a sponge, absorbing all the education and leaving, right? The college experience is about absorbing that information and then also giving some back out so that other people are learning from you just as much as you're learning from them. It's this very dynamic, vibrant environment. And so colleges want to know, who are you in a classroom? That's the information they're looking for in these letters of recommendation. When students are applying to college on the Common application, there are different recommender sections. So the first type of recommender is going to be the counselor, the school counselor. Some school counselors will write a lengthy recommendation letter for their students. I don't see this as commonly at the public schools, simply because the school counselors have such large caseloads that it would be nearly impossible for them to write a letter personally addressing the strengths of all of the students that they're trying to serve and work with. So the counselor letter is sort of in flux. So some schools submit them, some schools don't. That's fine. Whatever your school is doing is totally fine, and they're supporting your student, and don't worry about the counselor letter. But the teacher recommendations are where we need to focus. So the next section are the teacher recommenders. These are going to be academic core classes from your student's junior year. So math, history, English, science, world language if they're taking language junior year. We're looking for the junior year teachers because ideally colleges are trying to get an idea of who your student is or who the student is in an academic setting within a year or so of them attending the college. So if they're the class of 2025, the college doesn't really see a letter from sophomore year. Now we're multiple years removed as being the most valid picture of the student and the way that they contribute to a classroom. So junior year is really what we're going for. Teachers oftentimes will write letters that are fine. If they don't really know a student very well, they're going to do the best they can, right? And they're going to write about more general observations. They'll probably use a lot of adjectives to describe your student. They might do a recap of the different ways that your student is involved in his or her high school community. All of this is fine and will not hurt the student at all, but it won't help. So if the college is looking for that letter of recommendation to get some other piece of information to help set your student apart, that level of letter isn't going to do it. What we're looking for here is the teacher to be able to tell a story about your student, to be able to say, this is how this student contributes to the classroom atmosphere. This is how they overcome challenge. This is how they interact with their peers. This is what they're known for in my class. Here's who they're going to be in your academic setting. The only way that teachers can write something like that is if the student gives the teacher a chance to get to know them. So that's why I push the students so hard to create these teacher relationships. It can be little things like literally walking into class and saying hello or good morning or good afternoon. And at the end of class, saying thank you and goodbye. I know that it sounds really silly as adults. I've worked in high schools. I worked in high schools for many years before I started doing this. And it's really common for students. They're in their own world. They're busy. They come in, they sit down, they get their stuff out. They wait for class to start. They pack their stuff up. They're with their friends and they leave. They don't always make that acknowledgement. And so when a student does greet or say goodbye to a teacher, that kind of thing stands out, right? So I tell the students that. Participation, obviously, going to the teacher when the class is difficult instead of going to friends to get help with studying or looking things up online. Those are great resources. You should totally do that. Use all of your resources, but go to the teacher too. Show the teacher that you're putting forth the effort. All of these kinds of things are giving the teacher an opportunity to get to know the student a little bit more. So any of those kinds of small interactions. I also ask my students how often they engage in like small talk with their teachers. It doesn't always happen, but the ones who do, again, end up getting letters of recommendation that can get a little more about their personality, right? So it's really important for them to be able to interact with their teachers and be able to have some sort of reflection on who they are academically. Every school is going to be different. Some schools don't require letters of recommendation from teachers at all, but they'll allow you to submit one if you want to. Some schools will require that you have at least one letter of recommendation and then give you an option to submit more. So to make sure your bases are covered, I like to have 2 teacher recommendations. There's a third category of recommender, and that is the other recommender. And under the other recommender umbrella, that's where we have people like bosses, coaches, mentors, advisors, arts teachers, someone who teaches the student in some sort of capacity that is not a core academic area. And for a student who really shines in one of those areas, these are great additional recommendations to have. So we also think about who could be your other recommender, who can talk about who you are outside of an academic setting. If you have a student who is applying to a really niche community, if they're applying to an art school, if they're applying to a theater program or a dance program or something really specific, or if they're trying to play a sport in college, right? Then recommendations from those teachers and from those coaches who can speak to not only their ability, but also how they contribute to those artistic and athletic communities are going to be really important. So those are the 3 different sections. So you've got the counselor, you've got the teachers, and you've got the other. One last thing about the counselor. So just because they're your school counselor may or may not write a long letter of recommendation, depending on, again, on what the school's policy is and what their limitations are, that doesn't mean that the student shouldn't make an effort to try to connect with the school counselor. Usually during junior year, high schools, public schools will have junior meetings in the spring of junior year just to touch base, start to get to know a little bit about the student, see what questions they have about the college process. I encourage all my students to take advantage of that. Having a good relationship with their school counselor is really helpful, especially if they have any questions, if they need help getting any forms, changing classes, anything like that. So letters of recommendation. So yeah, Sherry, I totally hear what you're saying. If students are in the arts community, again, there is another section for recommenders, and there is a specific arts teacher recommender type. So if your student is in the arts and they're really passionate about the arts and that's what they want to pursue, then they definitely should be building that relationship to get the recommendation from their arts teacher, and they will, and for many schools, be able to submit that, especially if they're applying to an arts program within the college. So the last of the big 3 are your extracurricular activities. So just like the recommendations can show a little bit about the student's character, the activity list on the Common App is also a place where then colleges go to try to better understand who a student is. The activity list can show your character. It shows your intellectual curiosity. It shows your level of responsibility. It shows how much initiative that the student is taking. All of that can really be gleaned from the activity list. In the Common Application, students are able to list a maximum of 10 different activities that they're involved in, and then they can give a very, very brief description of what their involvement has been in that activity. And then they also have to indicate their level of commitment. So how many hours a week and how many weeks per year are you spending engaged in this activity? So for students who are involved in, again, like arts or sports or dance or anything that's requiring, it's one activity, but it's requiring a lot of their time and effort, that's going to be reflected on this activity list. A lot of times I have students who are involved in these communities and they feel like they're going to look like a slacker. They're going to look like they don't do enough because they're in theater and that takes up a ton of their time, or they're, again, a competitive dancer and they're going to competitions every weekend and they're spending hours at the studio. They don't have the time to do other things. That's fine, because again, that's going to be reflected on the activity list. But what you really want to focus on with the extracurriculars is thinking about junior year is your final year to gain experience and growth in any area that you want to show growth in, or close any gaps on your activity list. So by gaps, what I mean is if your student has an idea of what it is they want to study in college, then we really want to have at least some kind of activity on that activity list, whether it's happening in the summer, it's a club at school, it's a job, it's volunteering, it's a online program that they completed, it's a personal pet project they've taken on, something that shows that they've taken the initiative to engage in that adjacent community related to what it is that they're saying they want to study. That's showing that they're taking initiative. So we really want to have something like that. If they don't have anything like that, then we really need to start trying to figure out a way to get them involved in something. So this is a really great time for students, I tell them, okay, this is a good time to do a gut check. If you are applying to college right now, we work on a resume with our students. So we get all of this on there and I ask them, like, does this reflect who you are? Like, does your activity list reveal what's most important to you? If not, now's the time to course correct. Now's the time to figure out, okay, what do I need to do? What activities should I get involved in? How can I prioritize my time to make sure that I'm spending it on things that are really most important to me and really reflect my values and my interests, in the way that I'm spending my time. So those are the big three: academics, teacher relationships, extracurricular opportunities. If your juniors can focus on those three areas now, it is going to pay off in spades when they get to August and we're starting to work on these applications, or they're on their own, they're starting to work on these applications, because as they're going to start filling out these different parts of the Common Application, they're going to have everything that they need. They're not going to be looking back and saying, oh, I wish I would have. Right now is the time to start planning ahead for that. So they'll be really well set up in August. So if you do have any questions, you can definitely go ahead and put that in the chat. So how can kids, and I'll look at some questions here. Okay. So Sherry also asked, how can kids who thrive in the arts make an impression? Yeah. So sorry, Sherry, I did not see that when I was addressing your other piece. So yeah, students who are focused on the arts and thrive in the arts, there's a few different ways they can do that. Some students that I work with love and thrive in the arts, and they don't plan to major there. I've got multiple students who are passionate about dance, music, theater, literally visual art. Yeah, kind of all of them, who are planning on focusing on something else to major in, but they know that they want that art piece to be a part of their college experience. So for those students, number one, we're looking at letters of recommendation. Most of them have a letter of recommendation from someone within those communities that they're really passionate about. Number two, when we're thinking about supplemental essays that students are writing on their application, a lot of them are pulling from those experiences because they spend so much time in those activities, reflecting on and sharing about ways that they've grown, ways that they've shown leadership, ways that they've pursued a passion. Multiple colleges this year have essays about asking students about what are you just excited to learn more about in college. And some students are choosing to address these passions that they want to pursue in college separate from their major. There are also some schools that will give students an opportunity to upload a portfolio if they just want to share that information about themselves, or if they want to apply to one of the art programs. So those are some different ways that they can stand out in the process. When is the appropriate time of the school year to ask for a letter of recommendation? Great question, Rebecca. So generally, I have all of my juniors start asking for letters of recommendation in May of their junior year. I choose May because it is after AP exams and before finals. So it's kind of a little bit of a lull. It's also usually early enough that the teachers haven't started saying, I'm full, I can't write anymore. So that's something that sometimes will happen. If you have a teacher at your high school that's really popular, they might say, I will only write X number of letters of recommendation, and I will write them for the first X number of students who ask me. So getting it early is really helpful. But if your school is on a semester system and your student's going to switch classes in January, then I'll also sometimes have my students just ask in January before the end of that semester. If they know one of their first semester teachers, they made a great relationship with that teacher, they really want to make sure they get a letter from that teacher, I'll have them ask the teacher in January and then follow up again in May just kind of reminding the teacher that they agreed to that and make sure everything is still all good. But definitely asking before the school year gets out. That's going to give the teachers, number one, respect of their time, so that if they want to write these letters in the summer before the school year starts, they'll have the chance to do that. Number two, if the teacher writes it in the summer, the experience with the student is much fresher in their brain than when they come back in August or September. And now they're already focused on their new cohort of students, and your student isn't as fresh for them. So asking in May is definitely a way to go. Okay, what about jobs listed under activity? Great question, Autumn. Yes, jobs are 100% a solid activity. Having a part-time job shows all of those character traits that I listed. So you have to show a lot of initiative to go get a job, right? There's the application process and sometimes following up 1 or 2 times. It shows a high level of responsibility to an adult other than your parent. It shows money management. Oftentimes there can be conflict resolution. A lot of my students who have worked in lifeguarding or some similar types of roles, in the activity description, will mention like sometimes I have to professionally deal with adults at the pool who, don't agree with the, break that we're taking and everybody has to get out of the pool, things like that. Those are really important skills to learn as a teenager. And to be able to reflect that in the application is definitely a huge strength. Shows a lot of maturity. Absolutely. Yes, because Sherry, yes, because teachers don't work over the summer. Right. So that's the thing. We want to be respectful of the teacher's time. So by asking the teacher early, you're giving them the space to decide when it's going to be best for them to write that letter. Some teachers want to get everything done before the last day of school so they can just enjoy that time off that they're not getting paid for, right? So that is wonderful, and they should be able to do that. Some teachers want to write over the summer. Some teachers will wait until the fall to write the letter. All of that is totally fine. And so being respectful of the person that you're asking for the letter and giving them ample notice is really just going to best serve the student, because it's also being respectful of the person that you're asking. So super important. Awesome. Looking back through. Okay, great. All right. I think we got all the questions. Great. So I will be back here on November 5th. So it looks like a lot of you had juniors, but if you have any seniors, or if you want to know what an application portal is, you should come back on November 5th. So when students submit their applications now, they have to follow up and follow their application process through something called an application portal. And they have to do that for every single college that they apply to. And they're super important. So with November 1st being a big application deadline, I thought November 5th would probably be a good time to talk about portals, because that's about the time students are going to need to make sure that they are all set up. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for stopping in and spending a little bit of your Sunday with me. I always really appreciate the time. And again, if you found this helpful, you can find a lot more information like this on our website, advcp.com. We have links to lots of different resources, my colleague Jamie's blog, my colleague Ariel's podcast. We have some videos on there. And then we also will notify you if or when the next Facebook Live is happening as well. So I hope you all have a great rest of your weekend. Have a great week. And if you have seniors, hang in there. We only have a few more weeks and November 1st will be here. So have a great night, and we'll see you all soon. Thanks so much. Bye.